are here to talk about our Transition Tuesday pose in action, our Revolved Crescent. So this was the one that went out last Tuesday, and tomorrow we'll have a new pose come out. Tomorrow's pose will be Half Moon, and so be on the lookout for that post tomorrow. Now, for Revolved Half Moon, we think about revolved in yoga, it's any type of twist that we're doing, right? There's something that's happening with the spine where we're twisting, and so that's why it's called a revolved pose. So for Revolved Crescent, the image that he used was a prayer twist for Revolved Crescent, and I kind of feel like Revolved Crescent can be done in a number of ways. You could have a hand to either the inside or outside of your foot. You could take the prayer twist like shown in the avatar. You could even have your arms extended, or you could take, like have your arms in a T. So there are lots of variations you can do with the arms when we think of Revolved Crescent. And so for today, I'll be going through some of the transitions you can do that you all suggested in the post, and then the ones that I thought, just to add on to what you had mentioned, we'll be talking about hands and prayer twist for that. And just know that you can, use your hands in it or your arms in a number of different ways for the Revolved Crescent. All right, so we ready to get started? Okay, let me pull up, oh good, the sprinklers just went off. The comments, there were so many good ones, and like full sequences too. So this was really cool. If you're looking for ideas on what to do, or how to transition for this pose, you can just come to this post and grab a full sequence. So Taylor actually had 2 separate posts, and she had about 4 sequences all together. So I'm going to come over to my mat, and the first one she had was Warrior 1, Revolved Crescent, Half Moon. So we look at, we're here in Warrior 1. We can go into Revolved Crescent by lifting the back foot up. And then she said to go into Half Moon. So this is really cool because you're going from a twist right into an opening. So it's a pretty bold transition. And if you have some beginners, you could have them come through like a low lunge first and then step into Half Moon that way and maybe put their hands on a block. So that's a modification you could do for that big transition there. And then her second one was Warrior 2, Revolved Crescent to Sky Archer. So we're here, Warrior 2, and then you have to really pivot, so you really have to squeeze through the inner thighs to move into a Revolved Crescent. And then she said Sky Archer, which I love. This is one of my favorite transitions to do from Revolved Crescent, is because you're reaching up and over and back, and you could even do like a Revolved Triangle too if you don't want to have both arms up, or you could just to add on to Taylor's, you could stay with the front leg bent if you wanted to make this a very activating transition and just go into a reverse warrior pose. So those were great. So she went from Warrior 2 to Revolved Crescent to Sky Archer for her second one. Now the only thing I would just make a note of when you're moving from an open hip to a closed hip, for beginner students, those who are still fairly new to yoga, or if they have limitations in their body, sometimes going from open hip to closed hip might be a little bit challenging, so you might need to break it down first to have them straighten and then slowly move into the transition. Otherwise, I think it's awesome. Loves that. Okay, and then Taylor also had Dragonfly Twist, front of mat, 5-point star, Revolved Crescent, back of mat, reverse triangle. So Dragonfly Twist, if we're thinking the same thing here, Taylor, I'm thinking it looks like this. And then she said to go to star, and then pivot back of mat for a Revolved Crescent here. And then she said reverse triangle, so you're up and back to the reverse triangle that we had mentioned earlier. So what a great dynamic flow where you're moving from like a closed to an opening, closed to an opening. So that's a really great way to just like energize through the body, because you're not isolating into like poses that are very similar one after the other. You're going from like bold to another bold pose. So great sequence there. And then she had one more, which was Warrior 2, Revolved Crescent, Marchers Gentleman Style. And I loved this conversation, Taylor, that you and Bree were having about the different names. It's always so fun to hear what some poses are called in certain areas or in certain studios, and then what they're called in others. So she said to go from Warrior 2 to Reverse Crescent to Marcher's Pose, and then into what you call Gentleman's Style. And so this one, I don't know if I've ever called this a name, but Bree said she calls this one Staff Pose, and then I'd like to call this one just a figure 4 chair or a one-legged chair, and Taylor called this a gentleman's style chair, which is so true, right? That's how gentlemen sit in the chair, I guess. and then to come into this pose. So that was awesome. So again, it was Warrior 2, Revolved Crescent, lift up into Marcher's Pose, and then into the gentleman's chair. So what some great sequences. So thank you, Taylor, for all 4 of those sequences. They were awesome. So Kayla had from a twisted low lunge, then give the option to lift back knee from twist. Okay, so she had 2 sequences. So the first one was from a twisted low lunge, and then give the option to lift the back knee. So you're here with the back knee to the earth, tuck the toes under, lift the back knee up into this position. Yeah, so what a great modification. Yeah, to always have them start on the knee and then maybe lift up. So Kayla also had from twisted chair, then take one leg back into lunge. So I'm going to switch to my other leg now, twist the other way. Let's see, I twisted that way. Yeah. So you're here in a revolved chair. She said to slide the foot back into a revolved crescent. So that's a great transition to do. You just have to move very slowly again for beginners, because that's such a challenging transition, to maybe even recommend they bring their hand to the ground and then maybe slide back and then come back into the prayer twist. Could be a nice modification for students who may not be ready for that challenging transition. Loved that. And then she said, from there, lift the torso, open arms into a twist, then do reverse warrior arms. Okay, yeah, so from either of those, she's saying you can open the arms and then maybe curl up into this position here. Great. All right, and then we also had from Ashley, she mentioned revolved chair, revolved crescent, revolved reverse warrior. So we're here in revolved chair, go to revolved crescent, and then it was, what was it? Oh, revolved reverse warrior. So, woo! These are my balance. There we go. Just lift up and go into your revolved reverse crescent here. Ooh, that felt really nice. So that was an awesome one. And then Crystal said to go from revolved chair, revolved crescent, exalted crescent, grounded crescent twist. Ooh, I should have asked what exalted crescent is, because that sounds really cool. So revolved chair to revolved crescent. I'm not sure what exalted crescent is. And then grounded crescent twist. So maybe grounded crescent twist is like this, or maybe with the back knee down. Exalted, I'm thinking maybe you come here and then go to the ground. So that could be a nice transition. So Crystal, you'll have to let us know what that exalted crescent is, because it sounds really cool. Okay, Andy said one-legged Tadasana, airplane, crescent, revolved, back to crescent, lizard, then down dog. Okay, so one-legged Tadasana, we're here, go into airplane, then into crescent, revolved crescent, and then I forgot, what did she have? What did she have right after that? Back to crescent, then lizard lunge, and then to a down dog, and here you are. And then you could even, just walk to the top of the mat, rise up, take the other side, or move through a vinyasa. So we did airplane, crescent, revolved crescent, back to crescent, lizard lunge here. And you could always do a lot of things in here. You could, go into half splits to give the front leg a little break, come back, and then move into your down dog. So very cool. All right, and then Tanya had some great text here. She said to start with a low knee, then to the revolved lunge, open the arms, stand up to standing revolved crescent, breathe here, inhale both arms to forward facing crescent, hands to the mat for lunge. And then she said to move into like a one-legged dog. Okay, so we're here in a low lunge. And she said, and then go into revolved crescent, maybe open the arms, lift the back leg up, and then come here, right? And reach both hands to the mat, and then move into one-legged dog, and maybe even into like a one-legged vinyasa. So very cool. And we have a few more. So there were so many good ideas that came through on this one. Thank you all for participating in this. I love to see all of these comments come through from you. It's a great way to share ideas and everyone to feel inspired. All right, Kumari said she just did this last night. She went warrior one to crescent, to the revolved, back to crescent, and then standing splits. So we're here in our warrior one, and she said to go to crescent twist. So you have to lift the back heel up, go into a crescent twist, come back to crescent, and then standing split. Awesome. What a great sequence. Okay, and then Eve had this really cool thing. I was trying to do this earlier. I'm like, wow, this is like really different. She said to, when you're in like revolved crescent, to take like side angle legs and go for the twist here. So my gosh, this works your core so much. And the leg that's bent. So I can really feel it in my inner thigh and my hamstring from here. And then what was the transition she said out of that? Say spread your wings, lift to warrior two. So you're here. This is like a really good power vinyasa type of pose, and lift up into warrior two. And she said to spread your wings. So that was awesome. Lisa said great ideas. Yes, thank you for sharing your feedback, Lisa. And Sarah had revolved. Her first one was revolved crescent. And then maybe bring your hand to the ground and lift up, and woo, lose my balance, into revolved half moon. And then you could come down into like a crescent, or maybe even just take a vinyasa. And then her other one was revolved crescent to chair pose with twist by stepping foot forward. Yeah, so this is a good one where you're here and maybe take your gaze down so you have a good focal point and slide your foot in to come into the twist. So again, you just have to be like really mindful with your target audience and make sure that you really guide them carefully to get into that, because it's such a challenging one to move from that twist when you have to lift one leg up and bring it forward. So awesome. Thank you, Sarah, for sharing those. And then our last one was from Rowan, and she said revolved crescent to revolved chair to revolved crow, and it's one of her favorites. So, here's a good challenge. So she said revolved crescent to revolved chair, so there we have that challenging transition again, into revolved crow. So your hands come to the ground, outside of thigh to your triceps, and lift up into revolved crow. Yeah, that is definitely hard. What a great transition. And you could even give that as like an optional challenge for your students. So maybe you just have your students like in this pose. You could even go from a revolved crescent and just say hang out here in revolved crescent, or move into a revolved crow. And so they put their hands down and come into crow, or they could, split their legs here and then meet back in the pose you had them in, and maybe come into a crescent lunge. So what some great options. Ooh, I love these. I gotta catch my breath here. So awesome. Okay, just to add on to what everyone else had put in the comments, when you're in a crescent lunge, I think it was Taylor or Sarah had said to go into the marcher's pose, and you could really do a lot from there. You could go from here into like tree pose, or you could go from here into like hand to big toe pose, and then maybe open up, and you could even like, fold down, come back, come to the center, and then you could go into, the figure 4 chair. So that's an option you can do, really like any balance pose from there. You could lift up. You could also go into a standing split. Hands come down, lift up into standing split. So rather than going from revolved crescent to crescent, then standing split, you could just go from here, hands down, lift right up into standing split. So let me see. I left my paper inside with all my notes, so I'm trying to go off memory here. Now from a balance pose, let's say you're in, I'm going to switch legs. Let's say you're in like a dancing Shiva pose. You could make this a nice counteracting pose where you're twisting to my right, slide the leg back, and come into revolved crescent on my left. So that could be a nice challenging transition you do for your students. Let's see, what else did I have on my list? I'm like really regretting I left that paper inside now, because I did have some other ideas on there. I'll have to add them to the comments when we're done with the live video. Okay, so it was crescent. You could also go from crescent and just go away, mosquito, and open right into side angle pose. So you're here, and you could open right into side angle this way. And it was mentioned earlier that you could go into like sky archer from here. You could even like pivot around and maybe come into like a revolved crescent on the other side. So lots of options that you can play around with for that pose, and just like really experiment and feel it in your body to make sure, get the light to adjust, there it goes. Just experiment around in your body to make sure the transition feels good before you throw it into your class, because with those twisting poses, we always have to be mindful of where the body is going next, right? Because with twisting poses, we want to make sure that our hips and our shoulders are prepared for that pose. So if you're doing any type of revolved crescent in your class, make sure that like the outer hips and the shoulders have a little bit of warm up somewhere in your flow before you move into that twisting pose, and it'll just feel better in your student's body, especially if you do some of those bold transitions that were demonstrated earlier. So that's what I have for you today. Let me see if any comments have come in. Nope, I haven't seen any comments come in. If you have thought of any ideas after watching this video and you're like, oh yeah, this would be a great transition, just be sure to add it to this video thread or in the original post so that everyone can see what your ideas are and use them in their class. All right, so have a wonderful day, everyone. Love and light. Bye.